A young virgin inherits a fortune and is forced to marry a cruel millionaire, but on their egg-dating night, he fell deeply in love. The air in the Carter Blackwood law firm conference room was thick with tension. The polished mahogany table gleamed under the dim light, stacks of legal documents neatly placed at its center. Isabella Carter sat stiffly in one of the high-backed leather chairs, her fingers gripping the edge of the armrest, as though anchoring herself from the storm that was about to consume her life. Across from her sat Damian Blackwood, the man she was being forced to marry. Tall, dark-haired, and exuding an air of cold indifference, Damian leaned back in his chair, completely unaffected by the gravity of the situation. His black suit was immaculate, his gray eyes sharp and unreadable, observing her with detached amusement, as if she were merely an item in a business transaction. The lawyer, an older man with graying hair and thin-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat, breaking the suffocating silence. "Miss Carter," he began, adjusting the documents in front of him. "As per the conditions outlined in your late father's will, in order to inherit the Carter fortune and retain control over Carter Enterprises, you must enter into marriage with Mr. Blackwood within the next 48 hours. Isabella clenched her jaw, her heart pounding in her chest. She had heard these words before, but they didn't sting any less. "This is absurd," she spat, glaring at the lawyer before turning her fury onto Damian. "My father would never force me into a marriage like this." Damian's lips curved into a smirk, infuriatingly calm. "Your father was a pragmatic man," he said smoothly. "He understood business, understood alliances, and in case you forgot, Carter Enterprises is drowning in lawsuits and hostile takeovers. This arrangement ensures your family's legacy remains intact." Her nails dug into the leather chair. "So that's what this is. A business deal. A way for you to expand your empire while keeping my father's company under your control." "Precisely." The casual arrogance in his tone made her stomach twist. She turned back to the lawyer, desperation creeping into her voice. "There has to be another way. Something else I can do to keep the company." The lawyer sighed, adjusting his glasses. "Miss Carter, I'm afraid not. If you refuse, the entire estate, along with Carter Enterprises, will be liquidated. The board has already prepared contingency plans for its sale should you decline this agreement." Isabella's world tilted. Everything her father had built, everything she had ever known, would be gone. She turned back to Damian, who was watching her with the same detached amusement, as if he were waiting for her to break. "Sign the contract, Isabella," he said coolly, "or walk away and watch everything crumble." Her pulse roared in her ears. Every fiber of her being told her to run, to reject this farce of a marriage. But then she thought about the people who had worked for Carter Enterprises their entire lives, the employees who depended on the company, the legacy her father had sacrificed everything for. She had no choice. With trembling fingers, she picked up the pen. Her signature felt like a death sentence. The Blackwood estate was a masterpiece of wealth and power, an opulent mansion with towering glass walls, chandeliers that dripped with crystals, and endless corridors lined with expensive art. It was the kind of place that screamed luxury, but to Isabella, it felt like a prison. The wedding was held in the grand ballroom, an extravagant display of wealth rather than love. Every guest in attendance was a business associate, a political figure, or a socialite looking to witness the spectacle of Isabella Carter being handed over to Damian Blackwood like a piece of property. Isabella stood at the altar, her ivory gown flowing around her like a cage, the heavy diamond necklace around her neck feeling like chains. She felt suffocated, her breath shallow as she looked up at the man standing beside her. Damian, in a tailored black suit, stood poised and indifferent, his face devoid of emotion. There was no warmth in his eyes, no softness in his features, only a quiet dominance, as if this was nothing more than another business acquisition to him. The officiant's voice was a distant hum in her ears. "Do you, Damian Blackwood, take Isabella Carter to be your lawfully wedded wife?" A long pause. Then, Damian's deep, smooth voice. "I do." A lump formed in Isabella's throat. "And do you, Isabella Carter, take Damian Blackwood to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. The weight of 100 emotions pressed against her chest, anger, resentment, fear. She forced herself to meet Damian's gaze, hoping, praying, to see something, anything, that would make this bearable. But there was nothing. Only a cold, unyielding stare. "I do," she whispered. The applause that followed felt hollow. The bedroom was massive, decorated in dark tones of gray and black, exuding the same power and intimidation as the man who owned it. Damien stood near the fireplace, his tie loosened, his sharp eyes studying her as she remained by the door, hesitant. "You look like a frightened rabbit," he mused. "Did you think I was going to devour you the moment we were alone?" Isabella lifted her chin, refusing to let him see her fear. "I wouldn't put it past you." He smirked. "Rest assured, sweetheart, I have no intention of touching you." She blinked. "What?" Damien poured himself a glass of whiskey, taking a slow sip before answering. "This is a contract marriage, remember. I got what I wanted, the company. There's no need for us to pretend we're something we're not." Her heart pounded at his words. Relief? Disappointment? She couldn't tell. He set his drink down and met her gaze with a piercing intensity. "You'll have your own space, your own freedom. Just play the part in public, and we'll both get through this." She clenched her fists. "And what if I refuse?" His expression darkened, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "Then I will make your life a living hell." A chill ran down her spine. She turned away before he could see the tears welling in her eyes. Damien watched as she disappeared into the adjoining bedroom, his grip tightening around his glass. For the first time that night, he felt an unfamiliar emotion stir in his chest. He had gotten everything he wanted. So why did it feel like he had just lost something important? The Blackwood estate was a masterpiece of wealth and power, but to Isabella, it felt like a golden cage. Towering black iron gates surrounded the property, and the grand marble halls inside were cold, lifeless, as if mirroring the heart of the man who ruled over them. The house was filled with expensive furniture and priceless artwork, yet it lacked warmth, just like her husband. Damien Blackwood was a ghost in his own home. He spent his days at work, buried in meetings and high-stakes negotiations. When he returned, it was late at night, and even then he barely acknowledged Isabella's presence. They lived under the same roof, yet they were strangers. Isabella refused to be just another ornament in Damien's collection of possessions. She moved freely around the house, exploring, trying to find something, anything, that made her feel like she belonged. One evening, she wandered into the library, drawn to the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. As she reached for a book, a deep voice startled her. "You read?" She turned to see Damien standing in the doorway, his suit jacket slung over his arm, the top button of his shirt undone. Isabella lifted her chin. "Is that so hard to believe?" He smirked, stepping closer. "Most women in my world prefer diamonds over books." "Then you surround yourself with the wrong women," she shot back. For the first time since their marriage, Damien looked amused. "You're not afraid of me, are you?" She held his gaze. "Should I be?" A tense silence settled between them before Damien chuckled, shaking his head. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Isabella more confused than before. One evening, rain poured outside, lightning flashing through the massive windows of the estate. Isabella was in the hallway when her foot slipped on the polished marble floor. She let out a small cry as she crashed to the ground, pain shooting through her ankle. She braced herself for silence, for her husband to ignore her as he always did. But instead, footsteps approached. A firm hand grasped her waist, lifting her effortlessly. She gasped as she found herself staring up at Damien, his eyes dark with something she couldn't quite name. For a long moment, he just held her there, his grip gentler than she expected. "You should be more careful," he muttered, his voice lower than usual. She swallowed hard, her pulse pounding. "Why do you care?" she whispered. Damien's jaw tightened. Then, just like that, the moment was gone. He released her abruptly, as if realizing what he had done. "I don't," he said coldly before turning and walking away. But Isabella saw the flicker of hesitation in his eyes before he left. Damien tried to ignore her, tried to tell himself that she was just another responsibility, another burden he had been forced to carry. But she wasn't. She was different. She wasn't desperate for his money like the women who threw themselves at him. She wasn't easily intimidated. And that unsettled him. Late at night, he would find himself watching her, from the shadows of his study, through the crack of a half-open door. She would sit in the library, reading by the firelight, her expression calm, determined, beautiful. And for the first time in years, Damien felt something he couldn't understand. Something dangerous. Something real. The Blackwood estate was silent that night, the only sound the distant hum of the wind against the vast windows. In her bedroom, Isabella sat on the edge of the massive four-poster bed, her fingers gripping the silk sheets beneath her. She had known this night would come. The night when Damien would finally claim what he believed was rightfully his. It was part of the contract, part of the marriage she had never wanted. A chill ran through her as she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Slow, measured, unavoidable. The door swung open. Damien stood in the doorway, his frame dark against the dim light from the hall, his expression unreadable. For weeks they had avoided each other, living separate lives despite sharing a last name. But now, as he stepped inside and closed the door behind him, the distance between them disappeared. His gray eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time Isabella felt trapped. He loosened the black tie around his neck, letting it slip onto the floor. His gaze never wavered. Isabella's heart pounded. This was it. Damien took a step forward, then another. Isabella refused to look away, despite the fear curling in her stomach. She had spent weeks trying to harden herself for this moment, convincing herself that she would endure it without showing weakness. But when he finally stood before her, when his fingers tilted her chin up to meet his gaze, she saw something she hadn't expected. Hesitation. For a moment his expression softened. "You're afraid," he murmured. She swallowed hard. "I'm not." His lips curved slightly, as if he didn't believe her. "You're shaking." She clenched her fists. "Because I don't want this." Damien's smirk faltered. Something about the way she said it, firm, unwavering, made something inside him twist painfully. His fingers brushed against her wrist, and she flinched. Not out of fear, but because she had never been touched this way before. That realization hit him like a thunderbolt. He stilled, his eyes narrowing. Then, with a sharp intake of breath, he understood. Isabella turned away, shame burning in her cheeks. "I don't owe you an explanation." Damien exhaled, stepping back. This changed everything. For weeks he had assumed she was just like the others, another woman thrown into his world for money, for power, for status. But now he saw her for what she truly was. Innocent, unbroken, different. And suddenly, the idea of touching her felt wrong. Damien let out a slow breath. Then, much to Isabella's shock, he turned away. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He grabbed his tie from the floor, running a hand through his dark hair. "I'm leaving." Isabella blinked. "What?" Damien reached the door, pausing for a moment. Then, without looking back, he said the last thing she ever expected to hear. "I won't touch you." Then he was gone, leaving her staring at the empty doorway, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't understand. From that night forward, something shifted between them. Damien avoided her, but not in the way he had before. Before it had been cold indifference. Now, it was something else entirely. A conflict. A battle between what he thought he wanted and what he now knew he couldn't have. He found himself watching her when she wasn't looking, noticing things he had ignored before. The way she bit her lip when she read. The way her laughter softened the edges of the mansion's coldness. He began making excuses to be around her. Not because he had to. Because he wanted to. And that terrified him more than anything. Isabella, on the other hand, was confused by his sudden change. The Damien she had married had been cruel, indifferent. But now he was something else entirely. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she hated it. The Blackwood estate had always been a place of silence and shadows, but tonight it felt different. Colder, emptier. Isabella sat at the edge of the four-poster bed, her hands trembling as she stared at the tabloid headline in front of her. Damien Blackwood spotted with mysterious woman, his secret affair revealed. The photo below the headline showed Damien in a restaurant, sitting across from an elegant brunette, leaning in close as if engaged in something deeply personal. Her heart clenched. For weeks he had been different, softer, gentler. She had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the heartless man she had once thought he was. But this felt like a slap in the face. She had been a fool. When Damien arrived home, Isabella was waiting. He barely had time to remove his coat before she threw the magazine on the table in front of him. His gray eyes narrowed as he picked it up, scanning the article. Then he sighed, tossing it aside. "Isabella, this is ridiculous." Her chest tightened at his casual dismissal. "Is it? Because it sure looks real to me." Damien exhaled sharply. "That woman is an old acquaintance, a business associate. There is nothing between us." Isabella laughed bitterly. "You really expect me to believe that?" His jaw clenched, his frustration clear. "Yes, because it's the truth." She shook her head, tears burning in her eyes. "I was stupid to think you had changed. That maybe, somehow, there was something real between us. Damien took a step toward her. "There is something real between us." Isabella backed away. "No, there was never anything real. This was always just a contract to you. A deal. And I was foolish enough to forget that." Damien's eyes darkened, but behind the anger, there was something else. Something that looked a lot like pain. "You don't understand, Isabella," he said, his voice lower now, almost desperate. "Then make me understand," she shouted, her voice cracking. Silence. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, staring at her, his hands clenched into fists, as if fighting against something he couldn't bring himself to say. And that was all the answer she needed. A sob escaped her lips. "I should have never believed you could love me," she whispered. Damien flinched. Before he could say anything else, Isabella turned on her heel and walked away. This time, he didn't stop her. And that was what hurt the most. The next morning, Isabella sat in the lawyer's office, her fingers trembling as she signed the divorce papers. The ink felt like a final goodbye. Damien hadn't even tried to stop her. He hadn't fought for her. And that told her everything she needed to know. She had loved him. Somewhere along the way, against all odds, she had fallen for him. But it hadn't been enough. She left the Blackwood estate that night, taking nothing with her but a broken heart. For the first time in his life, Damien Blackwood felt completely and utterly lost. He sat alone in his study, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at the untouched divorce papers on his desk. He could sign them. End this once and for all. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. Because the moment Isabella walked out of his life, he realized the truth he had been too afraid to admit. He loved her. And now, it was too late. The Blackwood Corporation press conference was packed with reporters, their cameras flashing as Damien Blackwood took the stage. His expression was unreadable, his sharp gray eyes scanning the crowd, searching for one person who wasn't there. He adjusted the microphone, exhaling slowly before speaking. "I won't be taking any business-related questions today," he said, his deep voice echoing through the hall. "Because this isn't about business." A murmur spread across the room. The journalists leaned forward, sensing something unexpected. Damien's grip tightened on the podium. "A few weeks ago, a false story circulated about me having an affair. I didn't address it then, and that was my mistake." He paused, his expression darkening. "But I need to make something clear. There was never another woman. There has only ever been one." The murmurs grew louder. Damien swallowed hard, his voice softer now but unwavering. "Isabella Carter is the only woman I have ever loved." Gasps erupted from the audience. The statement was bold, raw, real. The Damien Blackwood the world knew never spoke about personal matters, never showed vulnerability. But today he did. He did. Because he had nothing left to lose. "She left because she believed I didn't care," he admitted, his gaze heavy with regret. "But the truth is, I was too much of a coward to tell her what she meant to me." He let out a breath. "So I'm saying it now. To the whole damn world if I have to." He looked directly at the cameras. "Isabella, if you're watching, come back to me." Miles away, Isabella sat in her small apartment, staring at the television screen, tears streaming down her face. Damien had never been the kind of man to beg, to expose his emotions, to admit his mistakes. And yet, here he was, laying his heart bare. She pressed a hand to her chest, where her heart was hammering. Could she trust him again? Could she risk her heart one more time? As if she even had a choice. She grabbed her coat and ran out the door. It was raining when Isabella arrived at the Blackwood estate. She barely had time to knock before the door swung open, revealing Damien. He looked disheveled, breathless, as if he had been waiting for her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, "You meant it?" Isabella whispered, her voice trembling. Damien stepped closer, his hands reaching for hers. Every word. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. He took a deep breath, his voice softer than she had ever heard it before. "I was a fool, Isabella. I let you go because I was scared. Scared of what loving you meant. Scared of how much I needed you." He swallowed hard. "I won't make that mistake again." She searched his stormy gray eyes, seeing nothing but truth, sincerity, love. Then, to her shock, Damien dropped to one knee. A small velvet box appeared in his hands. But this time there was no contract, no obligation. Only a man asking for the woman he loved. "Marry me." Not because of a deal, not because of our past. His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't look away. "Marry me because I love you. Because I can't imagine my life without you." Tears blurred her vision. And this time she didn't hesitate. Yes. Damien exhaled sharply, as if the weight of the world had just lifted off his shoulders. He slipped the ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms, holding her as if he would never let go again. And he wouldn't. Not this time. 1 month later, under a starlit sky, Isabella and Damien stood before a small gathering of family and close friends, exchanging vows that actually meant something this time. No business contracts. No forced commitments. Just love. You once told me you had everything, Isabella whispered, looking into his eyes as she held his hands. But the truth is, I was the missing piece. Damien smiled, brushing a soft kiss against her knuckles. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. With those words, he pulled her in for a kiss, sealing their real beginning. The cheers from the crowd were loud. But in that moment, there was only them. Isabella, Damien, forever. And so, Isabella and Damien's love story proves that sometimes fate brings two people together in the most unexpected ways. What started as a cold contract became something neither of them could have predicted, a love that defied pride, fear, and the past. Their journey reminds us that true love isn't about power or wealth. It's about choosing each other, again and again, despite the obstacles. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more tales of passion, redemption, and unforgettable romance. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that just might change the way you see love. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next heartwarming story.